So I'm going to show you how to trim a bowl on the wheel. And this bowl is leather hard. It does not leave any obvious fingerprints when I touch it. It's not sticky, it's not shiny. It holds its shape really well, but it's also not getting dry at the rim. If it's getting whitish near the rim, it's going to be really hard to trim. If the whole thing is getting bone dry or is bone dry, it's going to dull the tools and it's going to be really difficult to trim. I do not recommend trimming something bone dry at all. So I want it to be the right consistency. And now before I get it onto the wheel head, it's really easy to forget this part. You're going to be all excited to get your piece on the wheel and start trimming, but you want to have some sense of how thick your piece is near the bottom where you're going to trim, or how thick your piece is overall. Usually I'm trimming to make the piece more even. So right now I know I have a lot of thickness down here. I'm also going to check in the center. I kind of have one hand on the inside, one hand on the outside, and just sensing that thickness. And that's hard when you first start to get that sense of thickness. But overall, I can feel there's weight near the bottom. It's getting thicker right in through here. And I can make my foot ring narrower. I can tell I have enough clay to do that. And I'm just, getting some idea of what my piece is like. Now I'm going to flip it over. I know from touching it that I have plenty of clay in the center. Usually if you're going to trim through anywhere, it's right here. Usually out here you have more clay than you realize, but there's always a possibility of trimming through, so be careful. So I'm going to use my wheel head with the rings on it to get my piece roughly centered just by eyeballing it. If I were working on something like a plate, I would use a bat because otherwise I'm going to hit the bat pins. So this one's plenty small, fits between the pins. So I'm just eyeballing it, and now I'm going to get it truly centered. So I'm resting my right hand on my leg or on the splash pan, whatever is more convenient. And I'm going to center usually about a ½ inch below where the outer edge of my foot ring is, or the foot. So right here, this is all lumpy. This is going to be really hard to actually get centered. So I'm going to go down a little bit lower where I'm actually still going to trim, but I'm definitely not centering at the rim. So a lot of times this will look off from what this is, and that's normal. This is handmade. It's not going to be 100% perfect. So you want to center where you're actually going to trim. So, but on a smooth part here. So I'm letting the wheel go around quite a few times, going relatively slowly, and it's touching my finger at one spot and going away. Touches my finger and goes away. Touches my finger and goes away. Now when it comes back around again, I'm stopping the wheel. My wheel has a little bit of lag time. It moved past that point where I stopped it, and it's about right here. So I'm watching that rotation continue. So now from here, I'm going to gently put both hands on the outside, and I'm pushing from the bottom of the piece over. I'm not going to push from the foot. If I have a tall piece, it's going to want to topple over. So now I'm going to check it again. It's pretty close, but I think it can be a little bit closer. The more centered you are, the better your trimming is going to happen. So it's definitely worthwhile to get it truly centered. So it's coming back around again here, and I'm going to just move it over a tiny bit. Okay, I think that's pretty good there. And now I'm going to hold the piece on the wheel with some wads of clay. So I have this nice soft clay that is going to not squish my rim when I press into it. So having it nice and soft is important. So it's not shiny, sticky, but it's kind of just past that. Usually clay fresh out of the bag works great, although sometimes this clay goes to waste because it gets a little bit stiff while you're working on it. So now I'm going to put my left hand on top of the piece. This is super important and the easiest thing to forget. If you go and put your wads of clay on without your hand on top, you're going to push it right off center, and then you're going to have to center again. So I'm going to make sure that my left hand's on top, holding it firmly, and I'm squishing the clay down and allowing it to passively press into the rim. I'm not going directly into the rim. Mostly I'm pushing downward. Now I'm going to go a third of the way around, and I'm squishing the clay downward. It's gently and passively moving into the rim. And you can see I'm usually using my thumb, just the strongest finger. So I'm squishing downward, passively moving into the rim, making sure that it is actually touching the rim. If not, it's going to scoot around. And now I want to check to make sure that it is still centered, because sometimes things happen and that will move as I'm putting the wads of clay on. So it still looks good. Good to check that. Now I'm going to start trimming, and I'm using this tool. It's a Dolan tool. It's kind of, I call it a Snoopy head tool. I like this point, and I also like this round part in addition to the flat spot on top. Sometimes I use these Kemper tools. They work pretty well too. They're a little bit better for smaller pieces. So now I'm going to start at the outside corner of my piece. That's where it's most lumpy. And I'm going to start to cut inward, getting rid of any lumps. So, I'm holding the tool. This is super important, actually. The way I'm holding the tool is on a diagonal across my right hand, my dominant hand, and my finger is at the base of the V here. So I need space for the ribbons of clay to come through. I don't want to be right at the top edge here. I need space there. Then my other fingers wrap around really firmly. So I'm holding onto the tool relatively tightly as I'm gripping it this way. And now I'm going to turn my hand this way, and I'm going to start to get started with cutting. I'm just skimming the surface first, and I also keep my left hand at the outside of the piece and touch my left thumb to my right hand. So my cutting position is at 3 o'clock on the wheel head. If this is noon here, this is 3 o'clock right off to the side, 6 o'clock here. So I'm usually between 3 and 4 o'clock, and that works well for the actual cutting edge. If you're starting to get away from your body, sometimes that'll work, but usually the further away from your body, you can't touch your left hand as easily. It starts to get awkward. So try to stay around 3 o'clock, maybe 4. So starting at the outside edge here, and I'm skimming the surface. I'm not cutting in really quickly. I'm just allowing some of the clay to come off the surface where it's lumpy. And now I'm going to actually start to cut downward and allow my foot ring to rise up. So cutting down, and I know by the shape of my interior that it's relatively round. So I have kind of a lump out here, and I want to get rid of that. I know I can blend that into the rest of my form because that's some extra weight and thickness that I don't need on the piece. I also want a nice curve up to the foot ring, because when this is right side up and we glaze it, the glaze is going to follow that curve up to the ring. If you have like a really flat spot in through here, sometimes the glaze will actually just run straight down. Gravity will just pull it right over that edge, and it's more likely to drip. So that round shape actually helps with your glaze catching as well. So now I'm blending into the rest of the form. So as I get into the body of the form, I'm easing off my pressure and just blending into the rest of the piece. So that's a pretty good start so far. Now I'm going to go back to the center of the piece. I could make my foot ring a little bit narrower at this point, but at some point I need to stop and actually come to a conclusion on what width I want out here, because that's important for determining what the inner edge of the foot ring is. So now I'm going to trim with my tool vertically, the pointy side down right now. Just kind of cleaning that up, making it look pretty. And now I'm going to go back to this outside corner where it got kind of sharp, and I'm beveling that. Now I'm going to choose the inner edge of my foot ring. So I kind of have that mark from my fingernail, and actually I'm going to go in just a little bit further. So now I'm holding the tool flat, my hands facing kind of slightly downward, still touching my left hand here. This hand can catch the piece when I'm putting pressure on the piece, especially out here. This hand being there will help to catch it from falling over. When I'm on top here, it's not such a big deal. I'm pushing downward more. So the pointy end of the tool is pressing down, just gently, skimming the surface, kind of creating the inner edge of the foot ring now. Now I'm going to flatten out the tool, and I'm moving towards the center. And now instead of going all the way up to the center, I'm going to lift the tool up, and then I'm going to start on the center and move back. So I don't want to go right into the center from the outside, because usually I'll get hung up in a spiral. So if I pick up the tool, start on the center, and then move back, I'm going to have a much easier time trimming. Now I'm going to pick up the tool out here, and again I'm just going right in with the tip, and then moving towards the center. And then when I get close to the center, I lift up the tool, and then I get it on the center and then trim that away. So if anything, if you keep getting hung up in a spiral there with your tool that you don't want, sometimes lifting up the tool, either switching to a different tool or a different edge of the tool, sometimes will cut through any kind of spiral problems. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me so far. Basically what I'm looking for is that I want this curve to continue into the foot ring. I usually have a curve on the interior of my bowl, so I know that that's what I should be following in through here. If I trim this flat, I usually have some excess clay and excess weight right in through here that's not necessary. So I'm gonna go just a little bit more of curve in through there. And then out here, I'm gonna keep looking at this line from the inside, continuing it onto the outside. So nothing's really finalized immediately. I kind of go back and forth once I get my shape going. And now this still looks a little bit wide to me, so I'm gonna hold the tool more vertically here with the pointy end down, and I'm gonna trim sideways. And I'm getting to more like 2 o'clock in this position because that's where the cutting edge is going to work on the interior. So cutting sideways, little ways here, and now I'm going to trim off that extra little edge I have. And I'm going to trim this sharp edge now, so I'm sort of beveling that edge, and I want to keep my tool clean. Sometimes it'll get clogged and it won't cut as well, so you might have to kind of use your finger to clean it. And now I'm going to round over the foot ring. And I'm gonna especially flatten this part where there were kind of chunky spots from the cutoff wire. So I want that definitely flat. And now I'm gonna just round that again, kind of refine the shape. And I wanna make sure that this outer edge of the foot ring is higher than this center point. So if this was a high point compared to the foot ring, it's gonna wobble when it's on the tabletop. I can use a flat edge, a ruler, or whatever, and just kind of double check that this is higher than the center point. If it's rocking on that now, it's definitely gonna rock on your tabletop later after it's fired. So I'm gonna do a little bit more trimming. I was fine, that was below my foot ring, but I just want a little more curve. Okay, so now just a little more refinement out here. And then blend into the rest of the bowl. Okay, and if I have any, this is nice smooth clay, but sometimes I'll have grog and I want to press that in and smooth it out, or if there's any sharp edges, I have a sponge with hardly any water. I squeezed out pretty much all the water, and I'm just smoothing the surface, kind of getting that to blend into the rest of the form. And then I'll use my finger, get rid of that shiny water, smooth it further. And then at this point, I would sign the bottom. I don't have a good signing tool in here, but I would normally sign the bottom. And then I'm gonna pull the wads of clay away gently. And lift up my bowl, and now I'm just gonna feel what my thickness is like again. If I feel like I have more clay to trim off, I am not afraid to put it back on the wheel again and center that all over again. So this feels good in here. I wouldn't go any thinner. This feels a tiny bit thick. I could probably put it back on and trim off a little bit more and through that part. And then I'm gonna rest it on its foot ring and just smooth the rim. And for my standards, I would put it back on and do that again. But overall, it's relatively even, and you can see that curve on the outside more or less matches the curve on the inside, which is hard to kind of see in the video, but I hope that helps.